Getting this one recorded a bit early because Laura can't make up her mind on where to go, and I'm not risking losing power for a week and falling behind. After months lingering on the topics list, the time has come to hear about the people that lead Mystara, or at least just in the known world, a collection of emperors, kings, and chancellors that shape the destiny of nations, from the wise to the diabolical, and everybody in between. So don your heraldry and get ready to swear fealty. I'm Mr. Welch, and today's Welcome to Mystara is all about the people in charge. Going in release order, the first up for this video is Grand Duke Stefan Karamikos, ruler of the nation that bears his name. He acquired his title 40 years ago when he traded away his ancestral home in Thyatis for the ability to rule over the Thyacian province of Traladara with autonomy. The rest of the world still thinks the Grand Duchy is officially part of Thyatis. Indeed, if he rules poorly or someone tries to usurp him, Thyacian legions will return for their land. Stefan is a fair ruler. He's trying to balance the ethnic tensions between the native Traladarans and the upper-class Thyacians. His biggest flaw is he gives people too many chances. He doesn't understand that many of his people, like his cousin Ludwig von Hendrix, aren't good people. Because of the newly independent status of his nation and the fact that several villains find him a weak ruler, at least militarily, he is vulnerable to various plots against him, his crown, and his family. Ylaruam is led by Sultan Muhammad al-Khalim. There's not a lot of information about him. Okay, there's literally like 3 paragraphs in the almanacs. And after the first one, everything is copy-pasted word for word in the future almanacs. The Ylaruam Gazetteer doesn't even mention him at all, as it was a fill-in-the-blank nation book. What is known about the Sultan is he is an educated man, but also a bit of an isolationist. He's part of the kin faction of Ylaruam, the leaders directly descended from the immortal Al-Khalim. Because of this, he prefers the nation deal with its own problems and stay out of the affairs of the bordering nations. The Principalities of Glantri do not have a single ruler. Instead, it's led by 10 different princes who are completely at odds with each other, and only an outside threat can unify the nation into a single direction. That's the flaw of Glantri, but it is the charm of the Gazetteer. Glantri is wonderfully schizophrenic, with each prince representing a different culture and often a different form of magic. Some princes, like von Drachenfels, are pushing for war against Glantri's enemies, while Prince de Malapetri is a paranoid madman who is a danger to anyone who enters his domain. Etienne d'Amberville is considered the most powerful prince politically, but he also appears to be a doddering old man who can't be bothered with politics. It's easy to play the princes off each other, and since there's so many of them and they are already suspicious of each other, their mutual distrust prevents any of them from gaining too much power over the others. The nation of Ierendi is technically a monarchy, but the monarchies are not only figureheads, they're chosen every year in a festival that serves as a tourist attraction for the islanders. True power comes in the form of 2 groups, ministers of the royal court and the tribunal. The ministers are appointed by the king and queen, 4 ministers each, and they are typically experts brought in from all parts of Mystara to help run the nation. The tribunal are 21 members of the most powerful families in Ierendi that run the day-to-day operation of the nation. The sheer numbers of the tribunal and the ministers keeps corruption to a minimum, as all members report to one another, making graft hard to disguise from all the members. This system actually works rather well, even though there's not a single person that can claim sole leadership in Ierendi. King Doriath of Alfheim rules the Elven nation with a mixture of stern paternalism and religious inspiration. He's not a zealot by any means, but the immortal patrons of Alfheim are pushing him to quest for immortality, which gets in the way of him running the nation. Alfheim is largely isolationist, being completely surrounded by Darokin aids in that goal greatly. Doriath likes things the way they are. He keeps the clans from feuding and deals with the odd human, bandit, or dwarven incursion when necessary. He's not a leader that shows favoritism or even friendship. When he's on the throne, he's all business. He knows about the Shadow Elves, and he despises them for what he sees are unreasonable demands. He is willing to go to war with the Shadow Elves, but he keeps their existence hidden from his people to avoid conflict between the clans. King Everest of Rockhome is the typical Dwarven king. He's stubborn in his ways, and he thinks his methods are the best way of governing. He's actually forward-thinking for a dwarf, introducing new methods from the different guilds that improve Dwarven life. Of course, being a dwarf, he's not ready to share those innovations with the rest of the world. He's happy to rule Rockhome as per tradition. He's grooming his son to replace him. He does have diplomatic relations with numerous nations, which is unusual for some Dwarven kings, but the extra trade expands the coffers, and it allows Rockhome to deal with their enemies like the Glantrians through proxies like the Ethengar. The Northern Reaches are, of course, 3 separate nations with different motivations. In Vestland, Harold Gudmundsson is a forward-thinking ruler. He is slowly expanding the nation into a mercantile power, with the expected pushback from Darokin and Minrothad, making Vestland into a strange combination of the Northern Reaches with their warlike history and the merchant nations, trying to keep the nation's warlike past intact by literally carving away into new markets. Instead of paying to use the Darokin roads into other countries, He has his warriors clear a way to a new market by just carving through the Badlands so the merchants can follow the new, faster, and untaxed route. While shaping his new way of life for his people initially proved controversial among the Jarls, the money that is flowing in from both the trade and the defeated monsters has mostly satisfied his critics. Conversely, Ragnar the Stout of Sildurfjord is a much put-upon warlord of his people. He's not their king. He merely represents the whole of the Jarls in international politics. He has no power to give orders to the various Jarls, and they are free to ignore his decisions. He's formulating a plan to unite his people with him as king, but he knows that's going to end in bloodshed. He is a patient man. You have to be to try and lead the Jarldoms, but he is running out of patience at his countrymen's backwards customs. Hord Darkeye is the long-ruling king of Oslan. He's been quite successful in his reign, expanding the coffers of Oslan and leading numerous raids at their neighbors. Now he's in his twilight years, and he's looking to his heirs and making sure his two sons are taught the importance of good leadership. He is content to sit on his throne and watch his children grow up, though he is blind to the conflict happening between a spiritual advisor that advocates for the old ways and his new wife that is teaching her sons the importance of moving the nation forward. This conflict is probably going to last long after Hord's death. The 5 Shires have no central leader. Each of the Shires sends a sheriff to form a council that runs the nation. Each of the sheriffs runs a different aspect of the nation, and they can be replaced or just stepped down if another proves to be better suited for the task. Considering that almost all Hin have adventuring levels because of the Ylaruam phase the youth go through, all of them have some experience in emergencies. The 5 principal duties of the sheriffs are maintain the roads, the mines, the military, the navy, and the judiciary. The current sheriffs include an old miner who has spent more time underground than above it, to a young engineer who has the ability to shame other Hin into fixing roads long overdue for repair just by pulling out her crowbar and starting to do it herself. Oren Meditor rules the Minrothad guilds with a mixture of calculated menace and political savvy. It was his decision to turn the guilds into a trading empire to rival that of Darokin. The elf has managed to unite the various guilds to create a monolithic source of trade goods, and push the trade routes even further than they previously ranged. Meditor tolerates no dissent. He has to deal with the trade wars he started with Darokin. He's managed to turn the Thieves Guild into an international spy ring, as well as performing acts of sabotage against Darokin interests. He's ruthless, and he believes he can dominate international markets with a combination of intimidation and economic pressure. King Thar rules the Broken Lands and represents the largest band of humanoids in Mystara. He personifies the humanoids. He wants conquest because that's what was promised to him by the immortal patrons of the humanoids. He has done the impossible. He has forged an army out of the normally fragmented humanoid tribes, though he struggles to keep his legion logistically supplied. He knows the requirements for waging war, and unleashing his horde without proper supplies would lead to defeat. This is creating massive problems for him because the Legion wants war now, and he knows they aren't ready yet. A good chunk of his time is spent keeping his own troops in line rather than waging war on his neighbors. Corwin Monty is very much the opposite of his rival Oren Meditor. He is the Grand Chancellor of Darokin, ruling his massive nation with diplomacy and guile. He doesn't resort to the dirty tricks that the Minrothadians are famous for. Instead, he uses economic pressure and diplomatic favor to get what he wants. He has been largely successful, which keeps away challenges for his office from the other guilds. The master stroke over Minrothad is using Darokin's economic power to help other nations stabilize their economies. He is increasing the use of letters of credit, Mystara's first paper money, in other nations. Darokin has begun removing excess coinage from the economies at Monty's instruction, preventing adventurers from flooding the economy with ancient coins from the Nithian or Tamoran empires. If Darokin can control the economies of other nations, they can slowly shut Minrothad out of various markets. Monty is playing the long game. He's making the changes so subtle that Minrothad won't notice the impact until it's far too late. Moglai Khan is the Golden Khan of Ethengar, the first Golden Khan in almost a century. He has united the tribes through cultural understanding, forging alliances, and brute force. Now that he has forged the Ethengar people into a single army, he is looking for somewhere to unleash his warriors. The problem he faces is that there are so few nearby targets for conquest. He's an intelligent leader, but there are few places vulnerable to attack that would be worth his efforts. He has learned the lessons of past Khan's failures, and he's trying new methods like siege weapons and the use of magic in his army. He still uses classic Ethengar tactics like envelopment or driving civilians before the army to prevent magic or artillery being used against his forces. He is a patient man, but his people aren't. They expect results he's not ready to deliver yet. King Telamon leads the Shadow Elves in the City of Stars. He wants nothing else but to conquer Alfheim and return his people to the surface at the expense of their Sylvan cousins. What Telamon knows but doesn't share is that there are other areas in the Shadow Elves that they could occupy that wouldn't require them to displace an entire population of people. Norwald could hold the entire population of the Shadow Elves several times over, and they still wouldn't have any contact with other nations. One thing that's always bothered me about the 1010 timeline is that none of Alfheim's allies come to Alfheim's aid when the Shadow Elves burst out. Not Darokin, not Karamikos, not Glantri, not even the She Court. The Shadow Elves would be surrounded by enemies that want the old Alfheim back, and the Shadow Elves are fighting in unfamiliar territory against brand new enemies led by the natives of the Great Forest. That would have been a slaughter. Telamon is driven by envy and hatred of the Sylvan Elves, so even if there is a better option, he won't take it. Compare that to his daughter, Princess Tanadalio, who is more than happy to take another option if it wins the Shadow Elves over to her side. Unlike most elves, she is impatient, and if she can find a new homeland on the surface that doesn't require antagonizing a whole bunch of new enemies, she will take it. Then she reigns as queen above, while her father stews in rage below ground. Atruaghin is a mess. I mean, the book is a mess. I've covered the problems with Atruaghin in more than one video, but to quickly summarize, the book was a rush job and printed incomplete. The author didn't have enough time, so there is no formal government to the plateau, and little information on the government of any of the tribes. So instead I'm going to refer you to the Atruaghin Revised Gazetteer, available at the Vaults of Pandios, which I will link in the description. There's 5 tribal leaders, each with different problems. Ahote Rockhopper leads the Bear Clan. He's trying to balance the old and the new ways that are tearing his clan apart. The problem is he doesn't know how. The richer tribes are hoarding the wealth, and the poorer tribes are getting more resentful of the disparity. Degataga Tallcorn rules over the Elk clan. He's a firm believer in the old ways, and he's trying to keep the rest of the clans following them. Failing that, he's allowing his braves to approach other clans and enforce the old ways by any means necessary. That's not winning him any supporters in the other clans. Nokona is the beloved leader of the Horse clan, as he has found a way to get the entire clan, as well as the herds of buffalo that they rely on, off the plateau in a reasonable amount of time. He's trying to be patient and encourage his people that they have to proceed with their plan according to the schedule. But even he can see the end approaching, and he can't wait to be free of what he sees as a prison on that plateau. Zui Tekaholti is the supposed ruler of the Tiger clan. The problem is the Viper priests have the best claim to power, and the chief is merely a figurehead. He is attempting to gain more power over the priesthood, but the Viper high priest knows of his plan and is more than willing to anoint a new tribal chief. Tai Goldhands leads the Turtle clan, and he's more of a CEO than a tribal leader. His people prosper as they shed the old ways and have welcomed other cultures with open arms. The isolated Turtle clan loves their chief for his wisdom. As for the few followers of the old ways in his clan, he has gone out of his way to help them preserve their way of life. Then called the First of Thyatis is one of the most powerful men in the known world. He ascended to the throne after defeating the Alphatian Spike invasion and taking the crown for himself. He is from Auslandic stock rather than Thyacian, being a former gladiator. He's a political genius, able to keep his rivals at each other's throats so they can't plot against him. He has reformed the military and keeps them busy with skirmishes against Alphatia on the Isle of Dawn, as well as bandits in the Badlands of the Thyatis, and he has used them to expand and maintain the Empire's infrastructure. He feels his army is a match for Alphatia, but the war could be too costly to attempt. Being a Thyacian emperor, his list of enemies is too long to mention, and he has to keep tabs on every single one of them. That leaves him with many allies but few friends, but that is the price of wearing the crown in Thyatis. Empress Ariadne is the current ruler of Alphatia. She's probably the most powerful woman in the Mystara setting. While her rule has been a success by Alphatian standards, she still deals with the fact that her empire is largely divided, as the various rulers of the kingdoms of the empire offer little more than lip service supporting the empire. She's also concerned that her heir apparent, Xandar, is showing quite obviously he would be a terrible ruler and would threaten the very existence of Alphatia, as the various kingdoms would tear themselves away to be free from his incompetence. She is a wise leader, and while she understands the problems she faces, she also recognizes that she can't solve them alone. And that is one of the biggest problems of Alphatia, is that the most powerful people involved are so self-absorbed they rarely notice that other people need their help. That's a rundown of the leaders of Mystara, at least in the known world. Sadly, the Savage Coast and the Hollow World don't provide a lot of information on the leaders there, so I had to make do with just the known world. With the leaders of Mystara finally gone, that means military strengths are our new #1 topic. And joining the survey at the bottom for the next week is the continent of Devania and what little we know about it. So time to go scour the Dragon magazines for Voyage of the Princess Ark to try to find every little tidbit of information that series dropped on the continent, because that's about all you're going to know. So remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, and indoctrinate others in the ways of Mystara, because YouTube likes that, and if YouTube likes that, then apparently Wizards likes that. But until then, the king is dead. Long live the king.